It's been 10 years since I first picked up a game console, and to commemorate this landmark, I want you to join me on a voyage as I look back at more than a decade of games, from my experiences in the Middle East, as well as from my travels around the globe, to recall my own experiences with games, and to see if these games have stood the test of time. My name is Daniel, but most people online know me as Kaihatsu, and I've been fortunate enough to have traveled to over 25 countries and experienced gaming from many different perspectives. Welcome to a trip celebrating a decennial anniversary of gaming and traveling, both physical and digital. This is Nostalgia Trip. Christmas 2007, the end to an eventful year. A whole bunch of countries joined the EU, North Korea promised to shut down some of its nuclear facilities as a step towards denuclearization, and we all know how that turned out, and perhaps one of the more notable events I can remember, the Sheikh of Dubai, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, made the largest single charitable donation in modern history, committing £7.4 billion to an educational foundation in the Middle East. However, to me, the most influential event in my life that year took place on Christmas Day, as it was the day I got my first game console, and the first time I played a video game. And today, the day I'm recording this, December 25th, 2017, is exactly 10 years on from then. Although, I still remember that morning as if it was just this morning. I woke up quite early. My mum and dad were both still sleeping, and there was an odd silence in the house, as normally the area we lived in was quite busy, with a mosque directly opposite the house, and somewhere nearby with chickens that always made a racket in the morning, as well as an Emirati school up the road. The closed yellow curtains bathed the room in a soft yellow light as I got up and looked over the bed at the full Christmas stocking hanging off one of the bedposts. I jumped up and started to rifle through, picking up an apple and an orange that I probably never ended up eating afterwards, before putting my hand all the way down into the bottom. I felt a relatively large box, and as I grabbed hold of it and tried to pull myself out of the giant stocking that I was almost swallowed by, I knew what it was. It was exactly what I asked for. A DS Lite. Not long after, I had already started to play my first game. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. Fast forward to today, and not much has changed. My DS still works as new, North Korea is still nuclear, and now a country is leaving the EU. Speaking of which, I now live back in the UK. I was born in the UAE, but I left the Middle East in 2014, and I have to say I do miss it quite a bit, especially when you're standing inside a room recording video and it's 5 degrees outside and it's pouring with rain, while every day in Dubai it's sunny. Anyways, back to the DS. The DS was originally meant to be a supplementary console to the Game Boy, but due to its revolutionary design, including 2 screens, one of which was a touchscreen, as well as being backwards compatible with Game Boy Advance games, it cemented itself as a successor to the Game Boy family, and quickly became a hit, releasing at the end of 2004, and was released in North America first for once. Although, in saying that, it was released in Europe the next year, a couple days before my 5th birthday. Per Europe, late to the party as always. Despite the DS being released first, the DS Lite went on to sell many more units, 75.07 million units to be exact. And this lines up with my own experience with the consoles, as everyone I knew had a DS Lite as well. The only time I saw an original DS was when I went to my cousin's house, as he was a little bit older than me and he bought the original DS when it first came out. Now this has led me to come up with a little theory of my own. I think that the reason that the DS was so successful, especially the DS Lite, is because of the large number of millennials that were at the age where they were starting to be introduced to games, which is why the DS Lite was so successful, apart from its improved slimmer design. Which leads us on to the DS Lite itself. 10 years ago today, I picked up this very console for the first time. But before we talk about my own experiences, let's have a look at the console itself. The DS Lite was quite different from its predecessor in terms of appearance. The outer beveled shell was completely abandoned, but the DS Lite was no weaker. This thing managed to survive a lot, but we'll get onto that later. The DS Lite also featured a longer stylus, a cover for the Game Boy game port, screens that didn't leave weird pixel artifacts behind when turned off, as well as a slightly different button layout. The start and select buttons were moved to the bottom right, whereas on the original DS they were at the top of the bottom half of the unit. The system also featured smaller speakers than the original model, and as such the sound quality is slightly better on the original DS. The type of controls had also been changed from clicking when pressed to more smushy buttons that press down more. However, after trying out the controls on the original DS, I have to say that I think the original controls are much better, with the perfect balance between clicky and smushy, and have aged much better than the DS Lite ones. Super Mario 64 plays much better on the system that it launched with, and I often found it hard to control Mario with the DS Lite's D-pad, with Mario stopping dead in his tracks because the DS wasn't registering the D-pad being pressed. And this still happens to me today, which is why I prefer to play it on the DS I got for capturing gameplay rather than on my original unit. Nintendo went with more clicky controls, like in the original DS for all of their other handheld systems, which I think was a very smart move. And for those of you that are asking why I don't use a DSi to play Mario 64, seeing as that has a control scheme more in line with the original DS, my copy of Mario 64 is on a bootleg multicart that doesn't work on newer systems, but I'll talk more about that in another video. Back to the buttons. While the start and select button on the Lite are much smaller than the ones on the original model, the placement of them on both units isn't bad, although the lights are slightly closer to the main buttons, which makes me like them slightly more than the ones on the original DS. The power button was also moved to the side of the console, a much needed addition, which stops people from accidentally pressing the power button during a game.
I don't know about you, but when I was a kid I always found it really difficult to turn off the DS Lite after playing with it for a long time. One of my friends told me it was because if you played it for too long it would be more difficult to turn off, but I just think that this is one of the many rumors I was told about the DS as a 7-year-old.
You've already heard about the first one, but there were plenty more. Here's just a few more. Number 2. Playing the DS after washing your hands. This might sound like a weird one, but this one came around between me and my friends, cause one of them was using an action replay while playing Pokemon. I remember him activating a walkthrough wall cheat because he couldn't find the keycard for the Team Galactic headquarters, and then his game froze. He blamed it on the fact that he just washed his hands and that playing a game with damp hands caused it to lock up and freeze. Number 3. You can unintentionally break the touchscreen of the DS. I was actually afraid of this one for a while myself. The DS has a resistive touchscreen, meaning that you have to use a stylus in order to use it properly. However, many people just use their fingernail as the screen picks up small points of pressure. But after a while, many stopped doing this because a rumor from somewhere claimed that not using the stylus will desensitize the DS to your finger, and when you try to use the stylus again, the DS won't pick it up and detect it, which is kinda weird, but to 7-year-old me, that made sense somehow. Number 4. Blowing into the back of the DS and on the cartridge will blow dust away and stop the game from not being read by the system. This one is self-explanatory, although I don't know how this piece of information managed to proliferate all over the world, even into isolated gaming communities of young kids. Number 5. Action replays will brick your DS? Action replays are going to get their own video, but this is worth talking about separately. For a long time, I believed that using an action replay would brick your system, and even though eventually I started to use one not long after my friends got one, I'm still not sure if this is false or not, because every so often I hear about people using things like action replays and power saves that end up having their consoles bricked, which is why when I last used an action replay to speed up my playthrough of Pokemon White, because I hated Gen 5 and I just wanted to finish the game, I was still quite anxious about using it. Now that we've ran through a couple rumors, time to take a closer look at my own DS. Unfortunately, I don't know where the box for this DS is, as it got lost with some Game Boy Advance game boxes somewhere when transferred from Dubai to the UK. I think I've still got them somewhere, as I have a lot of the other boxes from my other systems, but just not this one. However, I do keep my DS case in this other bag which I got on an Emirates flight when I was really young, so there's that. I still have the instruction manual here though, which means that the box must be somewhere. The instruction manual says that this DS was distributed by JM Electronics Trading Company Limited, but I don't exactly know where that is, and my parents don't really remember where they bought the DS either, so I guess that's going to remain a mystery too. Now this charger is a Type-C plug, whereas the plugs in Dubai and in the UK are Type-G plugs. So every time I want to charge the DS up, I have to fiddle around with an adapter and try and get it into the wall. A lot of the time this would result in either me or my mum trying to poke something into the earth socket to try and get this plug to go in. And as well as that, using adapters can be quite scary sometimes, because we had a lot of really shoddy adapters in Dubai that when you tried to plug it in, they would like shoot sparks out, and I really didn't like that very much. This case is pretty cool. I have to say it's probably my favorite case out of all the other cases I have for my handheld consoles, because this one's pretty small and it's easy to transport around, whereas the other ones were less portable because they're so big and bulky. I actually remember the day I went to buy this in Dira City Centre in a Virgin Megastore. So this plastic thing inside this case is supposed to be for putting your DS in so that you can just keep it in the case and play it when you're out and about. But I actually broke this plastic thing when I was hiding in a bathroom away from a crazy toddler that was the son of one of my mom's friends, as he wanted to break my DS, so I was trying to shove it back in the case and it snapped. I loved this DS when I was younger. In fact, that statement in itself is wrong because I still love it. Many of my favorite games are on this system, but that's probably due to the fact that it was my first console, so I'm a bit biased. This DS is much more portable than the original model, and feels pretty nice in the hands, although I think it was probably better when I was younger, and now that I have massive hands, I usually use the XL versions of the handhelds, so the original DS is a bit more comfortable to me now. If you look at the bottom of this DS, you'll notice something odd. It says the distributor of this unit was Maxsoft Private Limited, which is Nintendo's official distributor in Singapore. So this console had come a long way, probably because Nintendo didn't have a proper distributor in the Middle East at the time, or because a lot of systems are imported into the UAE, which leads to some problems with region locking that we'll discuss later in the series. The bottom of the system is in pretty good condition, considering that a kid of one of my parents' friends tried to smash the console on the floor when they were really young. There's also a lot of dirt underneath the transparent shell of the DS, which I've tried to get out, but unfortunately, it's hardened, and I've heard stories of people accidentally snapping pieces of the outer shell off by accident, so I don't want to try. It's a bit of a shame because all of my other systems are still relatively pristine. However, I did take this DS out of the house a lot more, while I mostly just kept my DSi and 3DS inside. Unlike so many of my friends, I still have the original stylus that came with the system, and the cover for the Game Boy port, although it's a little scratched from a time when I dropped it on blue tarmac in the parking lot of Mirdif City Centre in Dubai. Despite all the things this DS has been through, like being dropped on the floor, down a staircase, almost smashed by an angry toddler, and almost being dropped in the ocean from a boardwalk, it still works perfectly fine like it did when I first turned it on 10 years ago today. With just over 154 million units sold, with 18.79 million of those being DS Lites, it's easy to see why this is the best-selling handheld console of all time, and the second most sold video game console of all time, just behind the PlayStation 2.
Many of the games I played still hold up today and are as fun as the day I first played them. So throughout this series, I'm going to be taking a look at games from a decade past, starting with games for the DS, and then taking a look at the Wii, and beyond. But for now, I think I'm going to celebrate the anniversary of me getting and playing my first video game by playing some Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. Join me next time when we take a look at one of the most significant games I've ever played. But until next time, Merry Christmas.
Wait! Before you leave the video, I'd like you to consider helping support this project by checking out my Patreon page. Your contributions can help make this series even better by helping fund the purchasing of better equipment and effect suites. As well as this, by donating, you can become a contributor to this series by helping out with important decisions and get access to behind-the-scenes videos. These rewards will be available for patrons as well as those who donate through the upcoming Nostalgia Trip Kickstarter, with lots of other cool rewards for pledging. Even $1 of your money can help make these videos even more awesome. Stay tuned for more information about this series and the upcoming Kickstarter by subscribing and joining my Discord server for updates.